Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. Let's dig in. Here's what's been going on in Russia in the last 24 hours. Russia's latest strike on Kyiv has turned the G7 summit in Évian-les-Bains into something much sharper than another leader's photo op with mountains, flags, and awkward handshakes. The strategic picture is this: Moscow is still trying to convince the world it is open to negotiations, while simultaneously hitting one of Ukraine's most important religious and cultural sites. That is a tough sell. Not exactly a "we come in peace" vibe. The Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra, a UNESCO-listed monastery complex and one of the most significant landmarks in Eastern Christianity, was badly damaged overnight into June 15th. The Dormition Cathedral caught fire. Ukrainian officials said Russia deliberately targeted the area. Moscow denied it and claimed the damage came from a malfunctioning US-made Patriot air defense missile. But reporters and Ukrainian security personnel at the site said pieces of 2 Shahed drones were found there. That makes Russia's explanation feel like one of those Soviet-era press briefings where the facts are doing Cirque du Soleil just to avoid landing anywhere near reality. President Volodymyr Zelensky called the strike one of Russia's most serious crimes against Christian culture and immediately tied it to the G7. His ask was clear: more pressure on Moscow, more air defense for Ukraine, and especially more anti-ballistic capability. He wants the leaders in France to treat this not as another tragic headline, but as evidence that Russia is escalating while still trying to play the diplomacy game. And that diplomacy game is getting personal. On Saturday, Zelensky spoke with President Donald Trump, wished him a happy 80th birthday, thanked the U.S. for support ranging from javelins to Patriots, and said they discussed battlefield conditions and ideas to bring peace closer. The two agreed to meet at the G7. That matters because Ukraine needs Trump's attention at a summit where Iran, Gaza, oil prices, China, artificial intelligence, and global inflation are all trying to grab the microphone at once. Putin also called Trump on Saturday. According to Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov, the call lasted 55 minutes and was friendly and frank. That phrase coming from the Kremlin is doing a lot of work. Ushakov said Trump stressed that ending the fighting was vital and that he was ready to work with Europe and Kyiv. Putin's reply was essentially, Ukrainian strikes inside Russia will not change the battlefield, and European ideas will only prolong the war. That is the diplomatic fork in the road. Kyiv is trying to present a moment of leverage. Moscow is trying to present inevitability. Trump is positioned in the middle, with the G7 as the stage and the Iran file pulling hard on his attention. Macron, hosting the summit, has reportedly shaped the agenda to keep Trump engaged for the full 3 days. That is summit diplomacy in 2026, part strategic coordination, part hostage negotiation with everyone's calendar. Now let's talk money, because wars do not run on vibes. They run on fuel, steel, logistics, and sanctions loopholes. Britain just took a major swing at one of Russia's biggest workarounds, the Shadow Fleet. On Sunday, British Royal Marine Commandos and National Crime Agency officers boarded the Cameroonian-flagged tanker Smertos in the English Channel. The operation lasted 6 hours and was supported by British ships, aircraft, and French coordination. The tanker had left Russia's Ust-Luga oil terminal near St. Petersburg on June 5th. It had been sanctioned in July 2025, changed its name from Myrtos to Smertos, and switched flags twice. That is not normal commercial shipping behavior. That is fake mustache and sunglasses at the airport behavior. London says Russia's Shadow Fleet includes more than 700 vessels and carries roughly 75% of Russia's sanctioned oil. More than 500 of those vessels are under UK sanctions. Britain had helped partners before, but this was the first unilateral British boarding of a Russian Shadow Fleet vessel and the first such operation in the English Channel. An Indian national was arrested on suspicion of sanctions offenses, while Georgian and Indian crew members remained aboard. This matters because the West is moving from sanctions as paperwork to sanctions as physical enforcement. France has already boarded several suspected Shadow Fleet vessels since last year. Sweden is pushing EU partners to do more. Russia, predictably, says the whole Shadow Fleet concept is a Western excuse for piracy. But from the NATO side, the logic is simple. If Russian oil revenue funds missiles and drones hitting Ukraine, Then the ships moving that oil become strategic targets for law enforcement and maritime pressure. Ukraine is also going after Russia's war economy directly. Zelensky calls it long-range sanctions, which is a pretty clean phrase for using drones to hit what the sanctions regime cannot fully reach. Ukrainian strikes recently targeted the Azot chemical plant in Tula Oblast, which produces materials tied to artillery shells, bombs, and missiles. Ukraine's security service also reported a strike on the Temp oil depot in Rybinsk, a strategic reserve facility with more than 60 storage tanks holding fuel and lubricants. There were also reported strikes on Russian oil and gas infrastructure in Krasnodar Krai. The larger point is not just what was hit. It is that Ukraine is trying to make Russia's rear areas feel less like sanctuary and more like liability. Fuel, explosives, logistics, rail, bridges, and Crimea supply routes are all part of the same pressure campaign. Crimea looks especially important. Ukrainian partisan reporting, cited by analysts, suggests Russia may be preparing to move remaining Black Sea Fleet command functions from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk because Crimea is becoming harder to sustain. That report is not fully verified, but it fits the broader pattern. Ukraine has been hitting fuel, bridges, and transport links connected to the peninsula. In occupied Donetsk, a Russian war correspondent claimed gasoline had effectively run out across the so-called DNR, including for military units near the front. He later deleted footage of a burning fuel tanker after pressure from Russian authorities. Nothing says everything is fine, like deleting the evidence and hoping the internet develops amnesia. Now, the technology story. This one is huge. Ukraine is moving fast on AI-enabled air defense against Shahed drones. A company called Skyfall is testing and deploying the P-1 Sun-Long interceptor, trained on more than 10,000 videos of drone interceptions. The system helps detect, track, and engage Shahed-type drones faster than a human operator could alone. Ukrainian defense tech hub Brave One says dozens of companies are using wartime video data to train similar systems. Mikhailo Fedorov said one company, Maxon, created a system that automates 95% of the interception process once a human selects and authorizes the target. That is a major shift. Ukraine is trying to solve a brutal economic problem. Russia sends relatively cheap drones in mass waves, and Ukraine cannot afford to answer every one with expensive high-end interceptors. Cheap AI-assisted interceptors could become the air defense equivalent of finding a coupon code that actually works. But there is a darker edge. Ukrainian developers are also testing AI for terminal guidance, ground robots, FPV targeting, and systems that can identify people. Commanders say humans still confirm lethal action. For now. The technology is moving fast enough that the ethical line may soon be less about what machines can do and more about what states choose to allow. Inside Russia, meanwhile, the strain is showing. Putin signed a decree raising the authorized strength of the armed forces to more than 2.39 million personnel, including 1.51 million military personnel. Russian schools and universities are being pulled deeper into recruitment for drone units. Ukrainian sources say they have identified more than 1,300 students who signed contracts with the Russian military. Zelensky also released what he described as intercepted Kremlin polling forecasts showing Putin's disapproval rising by September and United Russia support falling. Treat that as Ukrainian-provided intelligence, not gospel. But it matches a broader picture of a state trying to feed a long war while keeping the public from staring too long at the bill. Thanks for listening and for being part of this community. If you want to support the show, leaving a review or a thoughtful comment helps others discover it. We also share a daily written intel brief on Substack, restrictedhandling.substack.com, where we go deeper on Russia and China, along with broader coverage of Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK. Wishing you a great week ahead.